Hisoka's Post Mortem Nin transformation not only makes him one of the strongest people on the Black Whale, but in all of Hunter x Hunter. So let's talk about it. Now, before we get started today, I want to give a massive shout out to EDG Bara, who sent in some support and asked me this question about Hisoka. And this is actually a conversation that happens all the time in this fandom on whether or not Hisoka actually got a power boost from this. So let's dive into it. All right, first, let's just lay the foundation here. What is Post Mortem Nin? And simply put, it's Nin that's invoked after you die. But how does that work, right? Well, in the world of Hunter x Hunter, we know that will and desire are very powerful things. And if someone carries a strong enough will or a strong enough desire, it can persist even after they die. And that's facilitated by their Nin, their Post Mortem Nin, because they're dead. And we're told several times throughout this series that Post Mortem Nin is far more potent than regular Nin. And here's a few statements just as an example here. Even after death, the Nin becomes stronger. Nin doesn't necessarily disappear after death, and in some cases, it even becomes stronger. And her aura was amplified by death itself. And then, of course, in Hisoka's personal case, it's Machi that thinks to herself about how Nin becomes stronger even after death, in that moment where she feels the pulse of energy and he starts to resurrect, as it were, right? So I don't think anyone would argue that Post-Mortem Nin isn't a thing or that it's not more powerful, because we're beaten over the head with this in the series over and over. And yes, Hisoka does invoke Post-Mortem Nin here because he was dead. Like, that was fully confirmed, and that was even part of his contract. The first part of it was, if I die. So again, not that anybody is arguing this, but we're just laying the foundation. Now let's talk about why Post-Mortem Nin is more powerful. And yeah, you could just chalk this up to that's the way Togashi wanted to design this power system, but I believe there is more of a concrete answer there. And to find that, we can just look at Nin contracts, right? The way this power system works is, in order to have something extremely powerful, you have to give up something of equal value on the other side. A way to balance the scales, equivalent exchange in terms of Full Metal Alchemist, or binding vows in terms of JJK, right? And Kurapika is a great example of this, because let's look at his chain jail, for example. This is one of his most powerful abilities, that he can completely lock down a member of the Phantom Troop and put them in Zetsu. But the reason this works is because he can only use it on Phantom Troop members. That is the restriction he placed upon himself to increase the strength of this ability. And the trade-off there is, if he ever uses it on somebody not in the Phantom Troop, he will die. So very much like Post-Mortem Nin, he is staking his own life on this, and that cost is what allows him such great power. All right, so now let's circle back to Hisoka, a man who knew he was about to die, so he figured, I have nothing to lose. Let me try to make a Nin contract with Post-Mortem Nin. After I die, bring me back to life by pumping my heart and my lungs with my bungee gum. So Hisoka was 100% dead, and then he was brought back via his own Post-Mortem Nin, kickstarting his heart again, right? So here's where the disagreement is going to come for a lot of people. They'll say, yeah, he was dead, he used Post-Mortem Nin, but now that he's alive, he no longer has the benefits of Post-Mortem Nin because he's alive. But that's where I would disagree. I think he does have a big boost from the Post-Mortem Nin and is effectively still wielding Post-Mortem Nin even though he is alive. And to illustrate this, we can just take a look at what he was capable of before versus after he died. And if you recall, early on in the series, during one of his Heaven's Arenas fights, Hisoka lost both of his arms, and he needed Machi to come stitch him up. They made some sort of arrangement, right? And she sews back on both of his arms, and then he uses texture surprise in conjunction with a piece of paper to, hide the scars. Now compare this to what he does after the Chrollo fight. Machi is there and is like, all right, I'm going to stitch you up, because he's brutally massacred, missing a hand and a foot. And he says, nah, it's fine. I don't need you to. He just uses his bungee gum to fix all of his wounds, including creating a new hand and foot, and then uses texture surprise without using paper or anything. He just naturally does it to fix his appearance as well. These are things he was not capable of before, and the implications of this are pretty crazy, especially considering this is just mere moments after he resurrected. How else might he evolve his technique now that he has this post-mortem experience, if we can call it that? Because again, if he can just replicate any piece of his body with bungee gum and have it function just like his real body, then the only injuries that will ever matter to Hisoka are lethal ones. You could cut off all 4 of his limbs and he could just instantly heal with bungee gum. Like, this is absolutely insane. And the texture surprise one is a little less impressive at first glance, but nonetheless, it's still impressive because again, previously he had to use some sort of medium to add the texture to and then add it to his body to like cover up a scar or whatever, right? Here, he's just doing it with his raw aura. So the implications of that are that Hisoka could potentially disguise himself as anyone at any time simply by manipulating his own aura with texture surprise. And just to be clear here, I'm not saying that Hisoka's stats, if we can call it that, are necessarily better, like his bungee gum hand or foot are now more durable or more powerful than his previous flesh and bone ones, but just the evolution of his technique and how he wields it has clearly evolved to a whole new level, regardless of if he's actually faster or stronger per se. There's just a lot of cool places Togashi could go with this. And I mean, we might even have a ship of Thesis situation before too long. Like, at what point does Hisoka replace enough of his body with bungee gum that he ceases to be Hisoka anymore, right? And could he create clones out of bungee gum and texture surprise to make 5 of himself or make duplicates of other people? And we could kind of have a weird reversal of the first round of Chrollo versus Hisoka, where Chrollo was using all of the duplicates and puppets. Like, I mean, I'm not saying that's going to happen, but like, these are just cool things that are theoretically on the table. But in any case, yes, I think Hisoka had a massive evolution from Post Mortem Nin just in his understanding and application of his ability. And beyond Hisoka's physical evolution, his mental evolution is something to be terrified of as well, because now he is truly a clown with nothing to lose. He already faced down death, and based on the pure strength of his will, brought himself back. He is just out to fulfill his desire of finding these good fights now at whatever the cost, right? He even told Machi, like, to hell with letting people do things as they want them. I'm just going to kill every member of the Phantom Troop as soon as I see them. Like, this man is definitely one of the most terrifying on the planet right now, especially in the absence of people like Isaac Netero and Meruem, right? Now, there are other heavy hitters, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying Hisoka claps everybody, but he's definitely toward the top of that list as things stand right now. And then speaking of terrifying threats in Hunter x Hunter, those of you that have been watching the videos recently know we've been talking a lot about Tsuridnik. So I wanted to give a shout out to Bandit Chrollo, who sent in this comment along with some support and was basically talking about, as scary as Tsuridnik is and the insane potential that he represents, he's still obviously going to have his flaws. And 100%. My videos explaining his talent and explaining his abilities wasn't to say that he's some unkillable demon god, but it's more so just a narrative standpoint from where Togashi is coming from, setting up this terrifying antagonist, right? Of course, he is going to have his blind spots and weaknesses, and ultimately will be defeated by somebody in this series. Anyways, y'all, that's going to do it for this one. Let me know your thoughts down below on just how strong you think Hisoka is, because I really do think he's one of the strongest people in the world right now. Barring like Dark Continent calamities and stuff like that, like of the things we know, I think he's right up there. So I would love to hear y'all's opinion. And again, massive shout out to both EDG and Chrollo. Thank you guys so much for the support. And as always, thank you guys for watching.